What's going on, guys? Dots here, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys my new Magicka Nightblade PvP build for the Elder Scrolls Online Ascending Tide patch. So this is the newest version of my Umbra build, which I have changed from a melee build back to a range build just because I was getting a little bit bored of the melee style because it was really similar to my Stamblade, and I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. And thankfully with the Ascending Tide patch, we actually did see a buff to Swallow's Soul, so it made the range playstyle a little bit better. And so because of that, this build just kind of got stronger from last patch. And if you have been following it on the website, I actually did throw it up there in the middle of the Deadlands patch, and the build has performed really well for me. Honestly, it has not changed very much since the iteration that I threw up in Deadlands. I just kind of changed a monster set, and otherwise it's pretty similar, but the builds are working really well for me. I've been finding great success with it, and it's been a lot of fun. But like I do always say, guys, during my build videos, this is just what I like, what I use, and what works for me. If you guys want to run something else in your magblade, go right ahead. This is just what I personally have been finding success with when I do play the Magicka Nightblade. Now, jumping into it, guys, we have our first set, and that's going to be our monster set, and that is going to be Balorg. So Balorg gives you a line of spell damage, and whenever you use an ultimate, you gain weapon and spell damage equal to the amount of total ultimate consumed, as well as penetration equal to 23 times amount consumed for 12 seconds. So I think Balorg is just a really good set for Magblade, just because you're trying to go for that combo of the Soul Harvest, which then gives you the percent damage increase into the bow proc optimally. And so Balorg is going to give you your highest spell damage during that time to allow you to maximize your burst inside of that window. So in my opinion, it's an extremely good set for the Magblade's playstyle and gives you a damage amp that I think you need. Now, moving into our main offensive 5-piece, which will be present on the back bar, is going to be Clever Alchemist. So Clever Alchemist gives you 2 lines of maximum health, which I think is very valuable in the current meta, a line of spell damage, and then when you drink a potion during combat, you feel a rush of energy, increasing your spell damage by 651 for 20 seconds. So Magblade, though, even with some of the increases it's gotten to its damage and some of the buffs that it's gotten, I still think lacks a little bit when you compare it to some of the other classes out there, especially just Nightblades in general. Their damage is pretty telegraphed. And so for me, I find that sets like Clever Alch, sets that give these really giant increases to spell damage, feel really good on the Magblade because it lets you, during those times where you're ready to burst, give you that really big rush of stats. And so during that window, you can burst and kill somebody. And so this build, you're going to notice, is very focused around killing inside of a particular offensive window and then maximizing the damage inside of that window, which is why I think Clever Alchemist really fits that build perfectly, because that's kind of what the set is all about. And like I said, I just find it very valuable. It's a lot of stats to give. The downtime, it's decent. It's pretty decent, but it's better than it used to be. And honestly, Clever Alch has become a favorite set of mine, and it's something that I still do like on my Magicka Nightblade. Now, my front bar set on this build is actually going to be the Master's Perfected Inferno Staff. So this gives us 100 weapon and spell damage, and then gives you 600 spell damage whenever you use Clench, and then also reduces the cost of Clench by 10%. So we are basically, I'm sure you guys are going to be able to tell, you're going to want to drink the potion on the back bar to get your Clever Alchemist proc. You're going to want to go to your front bar and then use some combination of your ultimate, Clench, and into the bow. And so you're going to get 600 spell damage from the Perfected Inferno Staff, and then you're also going to get another 650 from Clever Alchemist. So that is a 1251 spell damage spike from just your Clever Alch and Master's Inferno. And then depending on how much ultimate you spend, you're also gaining additional spell damage and pen from Balorg. So as you guys can see, during that window, your stats are going to absolutely skyrocket, and that is when you're going to be hitting those big bows. I've hit 14k bows on people that I would consider very tanky. And so because of just how high the stats in this build get, and the build also has a lot of penetration with the skills that we do have on our bars. So I think the Master's Perfected Inferno, again, it kind of plays into the style that I'm going for with this build. And that is, like I said, big crit damage, just big damage in general, inside of an offensive window. So Masters Perfected works really well. Now, our defensive 5-piece on the build is going to be Transmutation. So Transmutation gives us 2 lines of Magicka Recovery, a line of crit chance, and when you heal yourself or an ally with a healing over time ability, you grant them 1351 critical resistance for 5 seconds. So part of why I like Transmutation is that I do think the crit resist, especially recently, has been very valuable, simply due to the fact that, you know, crit damage, people are starting to see the value in it, just because of how strong it's been for the last couple of patches, just with overall critical resistance getting lower, burst damage being more and more valuable, with healing being so high. People are starting to kind of move themselves more towards crit, and so because of that, a set like Transmutation is really good. I also do like how the 2 to 3 pieces give us Magicka Recovery, because I think the Magicka Nightblade needs a lot of mag recovery in order to sustain everything. Granted, I do think the mag recovery in my build is slightly high. I like to play my Magblade with a shitload of recovery. You do not need to run this much. You could always run a little bit less. But I think the Transmutation 2 to 3 lines do really help with that. Now, I know people are immediately going to jump to, well, Dots, why don't you run Rallying Cry? You absolutely could run Rallying Cry here. Personally, I just still run and still like using Transmutation because it's never, you know, I play this guy a lot in Battlegrounds, so like this is never, you know, obviously Rallying Cry is going to be, you know, lowered. The effectiveness is going to be lowered based on the people in your BG's group. I also typically have been playing with friends a lot recently, and so because of that, you know, I don't want one of my sets to get worse. But Rallying Cry is obviously perfectly viable here. It's very strong here to give you even more damage if you want to run it. The critical resistance will last a little bit longer, but the thing with this build is that we have so many hots that the uptime on Transmutation is basically permanent unless you're actively mist forming around, and so because of that, I never really worry about downtime. But you can absolutely run Rallying Cry here. It's of course a perfect substitute. You know, it's obviously the new flavor of the month set, so please by all means sub it in here if you want to. And if, like I said, if you especially do feel like the recovery is a bit high, that'll remove these 2 lines of recovery and you'll pretty much be good to go. But I just wanted to mention that here because I know people are going to see Transmutation and go, why not Rallying Cry? But figured I think that's a pretty good explanation on this set versus the other one and why you can choose to use it if you want to. Now, guys, moving into our weights and traits, we actually run 2 reinforced. I run reinforced on my heavy chest and my heavy legs. I run impen on my light gloves and light sash. I use divines on my light shoes, medium shoulders, and heavy helmet. So I go for a mixture of extra armor, a tiny bit more crit resist, and then more Magicka Recovery. Again, if you want to, you do not have to run these divine pieces. If you want to, you can maybe run another reinforced piece on the head if you want even more armor, and then you can choose a different shoulder and boot if you want to. But again, I like to play my Magicka Nightblade with a bit higher recovery, and so because of that, I did go with those 3 divines pieces, but these are changeable if you do feel, again, the recovery is too high. I probably would change this to reinforce and then do a shoulder and boot trait of your choice. And then I am full tri stats across the board. This gives us I've actually used a lot of tri, as you can see. You know, you'll notice when we get to the jewelry glyphs, but we use full tri staff enchants across the board. We actually do 2 triune on the jewelry with spell damage and then 1 arcane with spell damage. I go with a sharpened inferno staff with a shock glyph on the front bar, and then we do a defending resto staff on the back bar with that weapon and spell damage glyph. Now, moving into our skills, guys, our first one is going to be Swallow Soul. So Swallow Soul deals magic damage and then heals us for 36% of the damage inflicted every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. So obviously this is going to be one of our hots in the build. This is a range blade, so this is going to be our range spammable. This did get a small buff going into the patch, so it is nice to see that this is going to be even stronger than it was previously. Which made me happy, because I did think that if Range Blade needed some sort of buff, I always thought, you know, it needs to be in the spammable, because Swallow Soul always felt really weak, which is weird to say compared to Concealed Weapon, because Concealed Weapon was really bad for a long time, and then it got a nice buff, and now it became, I think, more favorable than Swallow Soul. So it's nice to see Swallow Soul get a little bit of a buff to become slightly more competitive, which I think is really, really good, and it feels a lot better to use this patch personally. We also do use Reaper's Mark. So Reaper's Mark is going to give us our major breach buff, and then when a marked enemy dies, you heal for a fucking shitload, as you can see, and then you also gain major berserk, increasing your damage done by 10% for 5 seconds. So it's because we have a really high max health pool that we get a really solid heal off of this. But I personally find this a lot more useful than Piercing Mark. You know, obviously Piercing Mark is really good, helps with pesky Nightblades, but personally, for fighting outnumbered, I find the extra major berserk that I get for killing a target to be extremely useful. Also, the heal is very useful playing outnumbered as well. And so because of that, I think Reaper's Mark is my favorite morph of Mark. I also did experiment with running a dot here, and again, burst meta right now, damage over time is not nearly as good, unfortunately. And so because of that, having the extra 6k pen to make our bows and our soul harvest hit even harder, very, very, very valuable. So that is why we run this in our second slot. We also do run Merciless Resolve. Obviously, this is going to give us our bow proc. So this also gives us spell and weapon damage as we light attack up to 5 times. And then while active, hitting an enemy with 5 light and heavy attacks will convert this to Assassin's Will, letting us fire the spectral bow and then heal for 50% of that damage done if we are within melee range. So this is going to be our main burst tool and what we're looking to kind of enable with this build. You're going to want to make sure, obviously, you're going to be firing bow procs even outside of your windows, but you want to make sure that when you're going for your big burst with everything, that you use Soul Harvest and you use Clench prior to firing off this bow, and that you also have Clever Alchemist rolling, because that is when your bows are going to be at their biggest, and that is when your damage potential is at its highest. And then forget if you also have Major Berserk rolling at the same time. So this is our big burst. This is what we're aiming for, you know, enabling the biggest damage for. So that's obviously going to be why we run it here. We also run Dark Cloak on the front bar. This is going to be for minor protection, as well as another hot in the build. I personally like to play this build as more of like a healing over time brawler, instead of kind of like a, you know, I stealth around and try to do Nightblade shenanigans. And so because of that, I do think Dark Cloak is just going to be a little bit better here. Gives us a really solid heal. Again, scales with our max health, and our max health is very respectable in the build. And plus the minor protection, I do find helps as well, just to give us a little bit of extra tankiness. We also do run Flame Clench. This is going to be our CC on the build. Not really much else to say about it. We use this for our crowd control, as well as to enable the Master's Inferno staff. So obviously that is why it's here on the front bar. We run Soul Harvest as our burst ultimate. So this is going to only cost 75 ultimate, deal magic damage, and it's also going to increase our damage against opponents by 20% for 6 seconds. And importantly, actually, this afflicts enemies with Major Defile, reducing their healing and health recovery by 16% during that duration. I actually find the Major Defile from Soul Harvest to be super, super, super worth it. I know a lot of people like to run Incap here and get Reeve, but for me, the sustain felt very obviously unnecessary. I already think the sustain in the build is a little bit high, and so because of that, like, I obviously don't need Reeve. The second thing is that I've been having a little bit of issues with Incap on my Standblade, actually, where like there's this really awkward time in between where it turns from regular Incap to Incap that can stun, where you just like can't use it. And I cannot tell you how many times it's come up where I'm like trying to burst and kill somebody, and then ZeniMax is just like, fuck you, you know, you can't use this right now. But mostly it's because of the Major Defile. I find the Major Defile to be extremely useful, especially in a meta like this where healing is super high and this is a burst build. When you have that Major Defile running, people are going to struggle to recover from your burst, and so because of that, I find it to be a very good ultimate here. It's nice and cheap, and if we do kill somebody, we get 10 ultimate back. So the good thing is that we can kind of chain a bunch of these together. You know, Nightblade just, you know, in general has pretty solid ult gen just due to passives and everything. So because of that, we're able to actually have this up quite a bit, and we're also constantly able to proc that Battle Orc to get our bigger bursts rolling. Now, going on to our back bar, guys, we actually run Elusive Mist here. So I do still, on Magblade in particular, because I don't run the traditional stealth, I really think that a movement speed removal is necessary here, and I really do like Mist Form for the Major Expedition. You know, I don't run a bow like I do on my Standblade, so I don't get Major Expedition from my weapon, and I do need to get it from somewhere, and so I do personally prefer Elusive Mist, because we do play this as a stage 3 vampire, and this gives us 75% damage reduction and Major Expedition, and we cannot be stopped while we are channeling this, but obviously our recovery stats and healing are disabled. You know, I also really like this too, because we get a lot of really good passes from it. We get on Death for 30% damage reduction based on our missing health, and Strike for the Shadows, we get another 300 spell damage whenever we leave Mist Form. So Mist Form is going to be my movement skill of choice. You know, like I said, I think if I was running traditional Cloak, I don't think I would need this and I'd be able to run something else, but because I'm playing this as more of like a, you know, healing over time brawling thing, I think Mist Form just fits it a little bit better. You could potentially run Phantasmal Escape here, but I personally find the Major Expedition to be quite necessary, so because of that, we do run it here. We do run Healthy Offering. Healthy Offering is freaking amazing, man. I slept on this skill definitely when it first came out, and then I tested it, and holy crap, this heals for a lot. You get a nice burst heal. You drain a little bit of health over 3 seconds, but with the amount of hots on the build, it literally doesn't matter. But most importantly, you get minor mending for 8 seconds, increasing your healing done by 8%, which is going to apply to all of your hots. So this his heal is really good. This is a really good burst heal. It is the burst heal that Magblade has always needed, and it makes me happy to see the skill that was previously basically useless be turned into something that was really good for the Magicka Nightblade. I do, however, always feel with Magblade, man, I always need one more skill slot, dude. I'm sure anybody that plays Magblade can relate. I always feel like I need one more ability slot, because if I could, I'd either slot like a dot or impale or something, but with the way I have it, I don't really have the room. But Healthy Offering, great burst heal for the build, plays into our healing package very, very well, which then follows up by our next healing over time skill, which is going to be Rapid Regen, just a generic heal over time, over 5 seconds. It just plays into the hot package really well, man. We got Swallow Soul healing us. We have Reaper's Mark healing us when we kill people. We have Merciless Resolve healing us when we hit the boat procs. We have Dark Cloak healing us over time. We have Healthy Offering as a burst heal, and we have Rapid Regen healing us. So people are going to have a tough time breaking through, especially with all that crit resist. And then if you also top it off with the light attack heals that come from siphoning attacks, it's going to make us even harder to kill. So we get those, 1568 health and 100 Magicka for 20 seconds whenever we hit light attacks, and then fully charged heavy attacks will restore twice that value, and then you also restore Magicka when this effect ends. So this is going to be a huge part of our sustain. So siphoning attacks is really good, and definitely, in my opinion, a necessary part of the Magicka Nightblade kit. Now, favorite skill in the Nightblade kit, even though you can't B-hop with it, which makes me really sad, is going to be Shadow Image. So Shadow Image, you basically place the image down, and it for 20 seconds is going to basically kind of be like a dot on your enemy and apply minor maim, reducing their damage done by 5% for 4 seconds, and you can teleport back to the shade at any time. This is really, really good for putting distance between you and your opponents. So you basically place the shade down, you go in, you do Nightblade shenanigans, then you go, oh shit, things are getting hairy, and then you shade back, and then you go into mist form, and you walk away. Now, on my stand blade, it's the kind of a little bit different. That's when you shade back, and then you cloak away. But again, because this is going to be more of a healing over time build, instead, we just mist form away, which is, again, why I have mist form on the build, is to escape after we use that Shadow Image. And so Shadow Image, it just allows you to play a lot more irresponsibly than you can on other classes, because you just have an instant, like, I want to get the fuck out of there, like, ability to press. So really, really good skill. Definitely recommend playing with it. You just don't B-hop with it, which blows, because I feel like a lot of PvPers, we have a natural inclination to press the space bar, but you can't B-hop with Shadow Image, which makes me real sad. So, because if you try to, you can't even use it. It's so sad. So I was trying to press it, it wasn't going off. So don't B-hop while you use Shadow Image, or it's going to screw you over. We also have Life Giver. It's our back bar ultimate. This is our defensive oh shit ultimate for when things get really hairy. This gives us a really, really big heal over time. And then while active, we also get other resto skills. So for those, I run Healing Ward, Combat Prayer, and then of course Rapid Regeneration, since that's on our bars. Because if Life Giver will cast the unmorphed version of these skills, but if you have them morphed in your skill list here, it will cast the morphed versions. So because of that, we went for Healing Ward and Combat Prayer for the Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve, as well as this just giving us a nice shield that also does heal us over time while it holds. So Life Giver, very, very, very strong defensive ultimate, and I definitely recommend it for that back bar. Now, guys, for our character sheet here, we're running 50 points into Magicka with 14 into health. We have 31k maximum Magicka, about 30, like so close to 30k max health, 17.2k maximum stam. The Triune really helped us get to that 17k stam. I hate playing with less than 17, so it helped us get there. Got 2150 Magicka recovery. We have 3150 unbuffed spell damage, but remember, we have like a lot of proc spell damage in the build, so this is going to skyrocket. We have 23% unbuffed spell crit, but we do run Major Prophecy on our potions, so because of that, this will go up quite a bit. We have 10k unbuffed pen with 15k and a half spell resist with 13.2k physical resist on the front bar, going up to 18.7 and 16.5 on the back bar with 1568 unbuffed crit resist, but we are wearing trans, so obviously that is going to go up a lot. We're on the Atronach Mundus for more mag recovery. We use the Ice Cream buff food for 4200 maximum Magicka and 420 Magicka recovery, and the reason we run all of this recovery is because, again, I am playing as that stage 3 vampire. If you were running this build as a Breton, you would obviously not need that much recovery. But this Nightblade is my stand blade and my mag blade, and so because of that, I wanted to play as a race that could hybridize between the two. So I actually went with the Khajiit for this build, and I do unironically think Khajiit is a good choice, especially with the crit damage buff. Your critical damage and healing is increased by 12%, and again, because we do get really solid crit rating in this build, we are going for those big crit bows. I think Feline Ambush is a really good passive that enables a ton of damage damage. You also do get some tri-stats here, which is a bit helpful too, increasing your health, magicka, and stamina, which Magblade needs all of them. And robustness is give us health recovery, which is freaking useless as a vampire, which kind of stinks. But we also do get a little bit of a boost here to our stamina and magicka recovery. So I think Khajiit is unironically a very good race for the build. I do, that is why I made my guy a Khajiit, because I thought it would be good for both my stam and my magblade. But obviously the other race I'd recommend here is probably a Breton. The good thing about Breton is that Breton would allow you to probably drop some of the sustain that I have in the build, and then you can run more damage in other areas. Granted, you would be missing that feline ambush passive, which does enable a lot of damage. You also could run this build as a dark elf as well, which would just pad your magicka and stamina pools, as well as increase your raw damage. You would lose the crit passive though. But this build, thankfully, you can flex a lot of different races in, and you can nearly run the build the same. Like, I think Breton, you would probably just drop like the Outrock Mundus and run something like the Lover or the Apprentice. Dark Elf, you could basically just run the build as is. So you have a lot of different race options here, but for me personally, I built this build around being a Khajiit. And then in terms of our potion, we obviously are running spell power pots because Magicka Nightblade has the most crammed bars in the game, so I don't have room for major sorcery or prophecy, so I needed to get them from my potions. Now, guys, moving into our champion points, we have Duelist Rebuff for single target damage reduction. We also have Ironclad for direct damage reduction. We have Deadly Aim for single target damage increase, as well as Master at Arms for direct damage increase. Going into our red CP, we are going to be running Balanced Vitality for 1400 maximum health because it is a health meta. And again, because this is a brawling build, we're going to be running CP that kind of enable that. So we have Pain's Refuge, 2% damage reduction for every 2 negative effects on you, up to a maximum of 20%. Sustained by Suffering for more recovery. Again, if you've played this build and you feel the recovery is high, you could drop this and run something else. I'd probably recommend Celerity. And then you could also run Relentlessness here for that major protection whenever you are CC'd, which gives us a lot more damage reduction after we're stunned. You could also, I would say, if you feel the sustain's high, I would say you can move Sustained by Suffering to either Juggernaut for another 5% damage reduction or to Celerity for another 10% movement speed. I leave that up to you to make that decision kind of based on your personal preferences. Now, again, guys, the rotation with this build, you want to maintain on yourself at all times Shadow Image to be able to port to it, Siphoning Attacks for your sustain, and then Merciless Resolve for your just kind of like bow proc, right? Now, basically, your goal here is going to be, and obviously maintain Reaper's Mark on your opponents. Defensively, you pretty much just want to kind of rotate between your hots. So I would say, like, when you're on your front bar, prioritize Swallow Soul and Dark Cloak. And then if things start to get a bit hairy, swap to Rapid Regen, and then eventually Healthy Offering. Now, when you are basically going on offense, you have one goal, and it is to enable big bows. That is your goal here, okay? So the problem with the Nightblade offensive kit is that it's really telegraphed, and there's quite a bit of delays between like your Swallow or your Soul Harvest because it has a cast time now, your bow because it has a minimum travel time. And so because of that, I don't want to necessarily just recommend, okay, every single time do Clench followed by Soul Harvest followed by Merciless Resolve, because any opponent that knows what they're doing, they're gonna like basically get used to that cadence and start to dodge things. And so you need to be a little bit unpredictable. So sometimes that's what I do. I'll run forward, clench somebody, and by the time they hit the ground, I actually can Soul Harvest them into the bow. Other times I'll just toss out the bow or the Soul Harvest first when I don't think they're expecting it, and then follow it up by Clench and then the bow. You have to be unpredictable because the offensive kit on Magblade is just so dodgeable because of all the travel and cast times. So the goal, though, basically, with whichever order you choose to do it, you need to make sure, like, when you're going for that big kill moment, that your Balorg is running from your Soul Harvest, your potion was drank on your back bar for Clever Alk, and you have your Master's Inferno procced off of your Clench in order to get the Master's staff bonuses. And so that'll give you all the extra spell damage and allow you to go into a really big burst and hit your opponent as hard as possible. But guys, I think that with that being said, that's actually going to be it for the build video today. Magicka Nightblade definitely feels a little bit better this patch than it did previously, just with those buffs to Swallow Soul. I still think it could use a little bit more of an increase, to be honest. But you know, definitely in a slightly better spot, slowly improving, but hopefully we can see it improve even more over time. But guys, that is going to be it for me today. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on it. It helps me in the YouTube algorithm quite a lot. Also, if you have any questions about the build, let me know in the comment section below, or even if you just like the build, again, let me know down below. It really helps with the algorithm. And guys, if you want to see more Ascending Tide PvP builds, please hit that subscribe button, as well as hit that bell to keep those notifications on. So thank you all so much for stopping by. I do very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all next time.